Existence. A World Made New. Written by Jared Neely. Chapter 5 Extracting. And how there were no handouts, no chances, only cruelty and blood-curdling torment. He deserved nothing in return, he had fulfilled the ultimate sin. Suicide. Immediately, an intense light shot towards him standing in the abyss. A brilliant radiance of crystal-cut whiteness emerged over top of him. He shielded his eyes from it, unable to open them to the blinding fluorescent light. What is going on now? He wondered, horrifyingly speculating the light and what was next to come. He lowered his head while holding his eyes against the inside of his palms. He could still feel the flames that once erupted over him. His skin tingled all over, it felt as if he had been dipped in molten lava and somehow came out of it without a trace of the grisly occurrence. It now haunted him as he stood in the unnatural light observing the glinting force as it broke through his interlocked fingers. The sound of a vacuum resonated into the astonishing light before him. He listened to it as it rumbled in the distance. He stood along the strange light hiding his face. Instantly, he could hear voices coming from all angles surrounding him. They were hurrying and appeared to be at work. Their voices were muffled, and somewhat faint as they clamored to one another. "He's unresponsive," one of them said. A woman's gentle voice cried out. "Malik!" "He's losing consciousness," she then said, concentrating. "It's only a matter of time if we can bring him back, Doc." An older gentleman responded to her. His rough raspy voice was that of a middle-aged male. "The gastric lavage pump is our only hope here," he added, and in that split moment Tommy could feel them poking him. He digested a large amount of sleep medication. The same woman stated. "What kind?" asked the older male. "Sleep aid." The paramedics who brought him in found a pile of bottles when they retrieved him. Somehow a neighborhood landscaper seen him through the window, and believed he appeared poisoned, she added. "Sleep aid? That's a over-the-counter medication, correct?" asked the man. "Sure is," she then replied. "His breathing's slowing. He's losing oxygen, damn it. What do we do?" the woman cried frantically. The surgeon with her remained silent, then suddenly spoke. "There is nothing, my dear, he's going into ventricular fibrillation." A second or more later, both of them became quiet. An eerie silence suddenly broke overhead. Neither of them spoke or touched him again. A strange flat noise immediately alarmed surrounding them. The gastric lavage continued to pump his stomach of the deadly toxins. The heartbeat on the monitor had ceased, leaving them wordless as they stood gazing at the screen. The glaring light was beginning to subside as he lifted his hands from his face. Peeling apart his eyelids, a chilling coldness swept across his face and body. He could feel his skin crawling as he watched in horror. The woman he had heard was standing at his side staring at the heart monitor a foot away. Her face was unsettled as she observed the screen. The older gentleman stood to her side, with his arm resting on top of her shoulder. "We tried, Mel. This is the toughest part of this kind of work," he said, sounding concerned for her. "You never seen this in training, but here on the floor it happens every day," he claimed. She peered at him with a shitty smirk across her face. "I know, I really thought we could bring him back," she uttered, and then turned towards the screen again. The heartbeat had flatlined and was resounding into the room. She pressed the key on the monitor and shut it down before walking away. Tommy glared as the green static that had abruptly turned stiff, which meant something horrible for him. It sent a sudden pain into his chest as he stood at the foot of the operating table staring down at himself. He cried silently as tears ran from his eyes onto the linens. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry for what I have done," he cried, wailing although nobody else could hear him. The older gentleman lowered his mask and placed his hand onto him lying there motionless. "A better place awaits you, rest in peace, Mr. Felper," he said, shutting his eyes closed. He then unhitched the machine leading into Tommy's airway and rolled it towards the other end of the dreadful room. "Bessie, oh God, Bessie, what have I done?" He began to break down, sheltering his face against his knees at the foot of the table. The surgeon across from him sat down in a stool not far from him. He began to jot information onto a clipboard. A troubled expression marked his face as he peered at Tommy's lifeless body from the corner of the room. He shook his head and began to write again as Tommy watched from the floor. "It's a shame, Mr. Felper. It shows on here you lost a loved one a few days ago. You must have been close to her. One bad decision, Mr. Felper, and now I have to fill this death certificate out for the record books. Definitely not something I look forward to," he murmured, still facing the clipboard in his hands. Tommy watched him another moment and sensed a familiar mood growing around them. The surgeon stared again, placing the clipboard onto the table beside his corpse. "It's not the paperwork that irks me, it's what love can do to a man. It's a waste of a beautiful life what you have done, but I hope and pray you follow the light when it comes, Mr. Felper," he suggested, sitting alongside of him. "Tonight I'll pray that the light falls upon you," he added, and then got up. Tommy peered at him for the last time as he vanished from the room, listening to the door as it shut behind him. He kneeled silently, staring at his former self. He listened to the intercom as it crackled and snapped above him and the body. Suddenly a monotone voice called over. Just then a woman began to speak. "Retrieval in room 3, retrieval in room 3. Thank you." He peered up at it, realizing the coroner would soon be hauling his failed body away. Just outside in the hallway he could hear hospital workers talking amongst themselves. Their voices were muffled from behind the door as he listened. He stood up, examining himself, feeling disoriented. Everything around him began to fade. It all became fuzzy and unclear. Immediately, his other half, his lifeless self, began to convulse, laying soulless along the metal tabletop. His eyes immediately widened, horrified to unbelief as he watched curiously a foot from it. He took a step backwards towards the wall as his eyes fixed against it. It shuddered and rocked violently against the metal, sending the white linen onto the floor beyond him. He glared, concentrating on himself, feeling petrified as he watched it joggle and then suddenly stop dead in its place. Without warning, the body shot up and sit there gawking at him. Its eyes watched, but they were no longer earthbound. They were far away and distant as they peered back at him. The whites of them had become blood-filled as they ogled him from the table. He backed against the wall as his hands met his face in horror. Shielding his eyes, he listened for it to speak, but nothing came. His chest raced a million miles an hour as he lifted his fingers free of his eyes, gazing at the living torso. The traumatic sight sent instant chills into both legs, peering at a mere image of himself. He remained closely by the wall, observing the diabolical image. "You have made a grave mistake, Tommy." It finally spoke, an identical voice, a deep raspy voice. His voice. He trembled in terror as he listened. "Do you know the meaning of life, Tommy?" It questioned him, as spit dribbled from its mouth onto the tabletop below. He watched in panic, noticing its feet were now uncovered. They were badly bruised, midnight blue and vein-filled. It was another reminder to him, the sleep aid, the suicide, a death as pointless as Bessie's. He didn't know it before, but he did now. He finally understood why he had done it, but even now, standing there, it didn't mean much. Everything seemed to defy logic. The world and the afterlife appeared to have no limitations. Being dead was all there was until now. The meaning of life is understanding the meaning of life. It moaned, intimidating him as he stood motionless along the shadows. You, on the other hand, will now face eternal damnation. This time it spoke very softly towards him, as if in private. As it uttered, broken pill capsules dripped from its putrid mouth. Tommy stared at him, terror-stricken. "Who the fuck are you? Are you me?" he questioned, the look-alike manifestation. "My name is Ingram, nothing more and nothing less," he replied, gawking awkwardly at him, his mouth leering heinously towards him by the wall. As he grinned at him, he could sense something supernatural taking over his former frame. His head was cocked to the side, oddly studying his ghastly face. A gut-wrenching chill rushed over the back of his neck as he listened to him standing there. His hair was dripping wet as he jerked sinisterly, perched against the metal tray. His eyes were bulging in front of him with his hands lowered to his sides. He immediately began to hack profusely until a banana-colored powder wafted from his mouth seeping onto the pillow beneath him. "Sleep is for the dead, Tommy," it grunted, squinting its glinting eyes. A frigid gust of freakish air suddenly blew in from the window on the far side of the operation room. Tommy stood a moment taking slow breaths, inhaling the sight of his phantom self. "You have one chance to prove your worth, Tommy, on Earth, to make right what had gone wrong. I will grant you one moment in time to redeem your wasted life. You have tasted one night in hell. But you have been given eternity for your squandered soul. What you do now will forever define you," it said, salivating from within its teeth that immediately lay back down against the metal gurney. He watched it laying there as if it had never moved. The scent of scotch riddled the air surrounding the two. His corpse laid there expressionless with pill residue oxidizing from its motionless mouth. Its soulless eyes were pried apart and remained staring at him. Approaching the body, he stared into its face, wondering if what he had seen was more than just another bad vision. It couldn't be ... it just couldn't. He thought to himself as he inched towards him. He reached towards his former self and began waving his hand overhead as if his mind had been playing a terrible trick on him. Whatever had happened as fast as it was gone. The lifeless body was all that was left now. His stiffened deceased body laid heavily against the soiled gurney as he stared another moment, finally turning away. Chapter 6 Confront. He opened the door heading towards the brightened hall. Fluorescent lights glowed above him as he entered into the Caribbean blue hallway where he took notice of a young couple. Two teenagers stood a foot from him holding hands. Their fingers were locked inside of each other's as he approached them. It must have been love at first sight. "Huh? Tell that to my Bessie," he uttered, but they hadn't heard him, or had they seen him come out. He listened to the young couple chattering as he trudged past them. "My mother's really struggling, Brian. I'm worried about her kidneys failing," the woman cried. "She's definitely a trooper, hon. Stay positive for her. Those kind of operations are pretty much common knowledge for surgeons these days," the man replied and pulled her close against himself as he leaned against the back wall. "She's been an alcoholic since I was a kid. I urged her to quit drinking, but you know how she gets," she cried, beginning to sob. "Face it, Shelley, your mother isn't going to stop until it's too late. I'm sorry, but my father lived the exact lifestyle. I'm pulling for her, Shell, I really am. I'm not going anywhere." Tommy glared at them until the conversation became a faint whisper behind him. At the lower end of the hallway he took a sharp right where he acknowledged three patients wearing white hospital gowns. They were standing in line at the fountain, but this time he ignored them passing without acknowledging them. "Nothing has changed here. I'm still alone and bitter, and I'm supposed to be thankful for what? Being left out and hung in the wind for the birds to shit on? That's right. My entire life has been a pointless clothesline for all the filthy animals to crawl onto and shit," he thought to himself. Shrugging his shoulders in frustration, he met another door in front of him. "That's the corridor," an immediate voice cried from somewhere. He spun around and saw nothing except for the waiting area, which was now a train wreck of sick people waiting to be taken back. He observed the room behind him and the lengthy hallway and noticed nothing out of the ordinary. He pushed against the door, but it was stuck. Let's not take this path alone," called the voice again, a strange voice unlike Ingram's, a much stronger and direct voice. It startled him as he stood pushing his weight at the door. "I don't understand what you want from me," he cried, and leaned again into the hefty door. "It's not a question of what I want for you, it's more of a choice, Tommy. What do you want most in life? When you exit from this room things will be much different for you on the outside," the voice spoke, almost humming into his ears as he stood there silently listening. "Remember this, what happened in your death is true. Even if things appear they weren't when you leave here, time is not on your side, Tommy, not in the least bit. Now go before it's too late," it said, communicating with him, as the voice dissipated into the room. He pushed the door once again as it creaked and broke open. His eyes peered into the vast light shining towards him as his body vanished into thin air. Shielding his eyes from the radiant light dazzling overhead, he could sense the heat from outside. The light began to fade off as he released his face from his hands. "That's a mockingjay. Haven't seen one of you in a long while," he uttered, studying it perched along the railing leading out. Its feathers were pearl white with a slight touch of gray on its underbelly. Its wings suddenly spread out as if it were about to fly away. He stood gawking from the sidewalk. In front of him an immaculate black 1960 Cadillac convertible began to slow and finally stop at the end of the stone walkway. Tom, I knew that was you," cried a malnourished man leaning out from the passenger side. "Come on over, buddy," he urged him. "I heard you were back from Vietnam. Damn, it's good to see you," he shouted, but he stood a moment before approaching the car full of unfamiliar men. "I don't think we know each other, Hoss. I don't remember you, I'm sorry," he yelled towards the fancy car. "You always were the joker, Tom. Come and stop with the gimmicks, ha. It's me, Dean, Chip, and Slinks, the boys," he said, fixing his dark-tinted sunglasses. "Get on over here, buddy, and come cruise the circuit with us," the man cried, waving him over. "I can't believe you don't recognize us anymore. What has the war done to you?" he asked. "It's been a really long day. I was just trazzing you guys," he replied, finally jogging towards the three others. "Damn. Tom, you had us pretty good there, ha, Chip said, sitting down at his side in the back seat. The leather smelled brand new as he sunk into it. "It's good to see you, guy," uttered Slinks, who was sitting in front of him beside Dean. Slinks suddenly lifted a bottle to his mouth and took a swift gulp from it. "Would you like some, Tom?" "Old Stag, ha, a real man's whiskey," he said, lowering it to his lap, twisting the gold cap tight. Kentucky straight bourbon, yee," howled Slinks loudly. "I'm all right, Slinks, I had enough to drink. I'm still a bit hungover," he said, peering towards the outside. "I have to say, things do seem different these days. Where are we?" he asked the others, immediately causing them to all stare. "Are you sure you weren't hit in Vietnam, Tom?" asked Dean, lifting his shades back on top of his head. He appeared serious this time as he focused hard at him. "Them Vietnamese bastards must have really given you hell out there in Nam." "Nothing changed here, Tom. Nothing except for your eccentric sense of humor, ha," said Chip, nudging him. Both him and Slinks were now sharing hits from the whiskey bottle. Dean turned back and dropped the gear as the Cadillac rolled. The top was vertical, allowing the summer air to blow through their hair. "Nice set of wheels, Dean. A brand spanking new convertible, huh?" he asked him, hoping to get more information on where he was and how he had gotten there. "Thanks a lot, soldier boy. Got it for a steal, ha, he replied, staring straight ahead. Tom glared at him from the back, examining his smooth black hair and how it was slicked. Pound bushwhacks covered his scalp as he stared from behind. "I'm hanging with a bunch of loaded greasers. I bet these guys have been drinking all day," he wondered to himself, as they came to a slow steady roll at a street light. "What do you mean exactly, for a steal?" he asked him, attempting to gain his trust. "Oh, Tom, you know, racing for pink slips. Some young jerk-off thought he could hustle me, so I ripped off these fine wheels, ha, Dean said, staring at him from the rearview mirror. He winked at him just before the light changed. "What a sucker, what did you race him with?" he asked him. "My father's Buick Roadmaster, ha, the kid didn't see it coming, Tommy boy, ha, you know my pops, the man's a goddamn general when it comes to his cars and motors," he said, gripping the steering wheel. He nodded. "I haven't forgotten, I have to admit, if I had wheels like this I'd be magnetizing the ladies," he said, glaring out. Dean spun back at him. "What about your portholer? That 57 T-Bird has to be pulling skirts. I know you aren't the type to peel off with some skag," he said, holding the wheel. At the moment he knew their names only from their service uniforms. All three of them were in the traditional tan army khakis. Their faces hadn't rang a bell, but he would play along for the time being. Hey. What's the date today? I forgot I had an appointment with the orthodontist and I can't skip out on it, he said, curiously wondering to himself if everything surrounding him was just an impressive dream. I have to get out of here, these guys think I'm someone I'm not, he thought, anticipating a smooth escape. Whoever they think I am, I'm not him. I'm not the Tom they remember, he thought quietly to himself. It's the 12th Tommy. Slinks responded, again raising the bottle to his face. I know that, Slinks, haha, I meant the month and year. He tried to laugh it off, but all three were glaring at him again as if he had lost his mind. Tommy boy, you're acting kind of unusual today. Maybe we should take you to the psychiatric hospital, haha, said Chip, who had begun to lose it. It's... And right before Dean could finish his sentence he stomped the brakes. The Cadillac shook as it came to a complete stop along the curb. What's going on? Dean? He asked. The others were just as curious. Hold on to your hats, fellas, he replied, staring out. Woo baby, shouted Dean from the front seat. He quickly crawled halfway out from the car and sat on the window track. Lady. You're going to hurt someone with those fine tail feathers, he howled, suddenly peering back at the others in the car. Get a look at her, boys, now that is a dime if Pop's ever taught me anything, he clamored. Hey there, come on over here, dollface, Dean cried towards her. She was facing the opposite direction and steadily pacing away from them. Baby doll, no reason to walk away from us, we just want to get acquainted, he said, realizing she had no interest in talking. Dean. Pull around the block and cut her off, haha, said Chip, who was half drunk. Alright, let's do just that, fellas, no reason to let the fish out water without hooking her in first, he said, causing the other two to scoff hysterically. Tommy boy, do me the honors of reeling this one in, Dean urged him, noticing him sitting comfortably in the back. I don't know about this, Dean, I just don't know, he replied, peering out as Dean mashed the gas pedal. Swing around the block and we will get her on the corner of 5th and 6th Avenue, uttered Slinks. Tommy boy, you better have your A game, this broad's a real kicker, I can see it in her, cried Dean, turning the radio on as they speed through an alleyway. Tommy watched the cars go by as they chased her without knowing it. There she is, fellas, Tommy, this is it, buddy, show her that big bad Vietnam gunner attitude and reel her in, make us all proud, Tom, Dean said, reaching back for him. He gripped him by the shirt and yanked him towards the side of the car. Chapter 7. The fellas. Look, Dean. I'm just not feeling it today, I'm tired and I'm not sure what's going on right now, he uttered, but Dean and the rest were already expecting him to be the Tommy Felper they perceived, whoever that was. Tommy the Joker, the riot machine, the Vietnam gunslinger, the lady killer, those were only traits his friends found in him. Who were they seeing in me when they found me out here? Who are these clowns? He wondered, erecting himself from the back seat. He stood up and leaned over the red upholstery, scaling the car until his shoes hit the concrete below. I got this, fellas, she's all mine, he said, not wasting any time. About time you start acting yourself, Thompson, haha, Dean hollered out from the car. The others began to burst out laughing. I thought he warned you about calling him that, Slinks said, sniggering at him in a frenzy. Oops, I forgot, he replied, chuckling out of control. I'd watch out if I were you, Dean. He might just turn back into the Tommy Felper we all know and kick your teeth in, haha, said Chip, leaning forward, putting his arms around Dean's neck. Get your commie-loving hands off me, you idiot, haha, he said, shoving him away. Take a look at him out there, he doesn't have a chance, said Slinks, suddenly tossing the emptied whiskey bottle out onto the grass beside them. He has moxie, and that matters, you schmuck, responded Chip, observing Tommy as he wandered towards her. Hi, my name's Tom. I couldn't help to notice you walking, would you like a ride somewhere? He asked her. She stared back at him with sparkling brown eyes. There was a pureness about her, he sensed it instantly. She smirked, and shook her head side to side. I don't familiarize or fraternize with military men, I'm sorry, we're at a war ourselves, a war for peace and a war to end casualties in the United States, she said. I know your friends and they are not the kind of people I associate with, although I don't recognize you. I take it you're all the same, she added, staring at him a moment. I admire how straightforward you are. I didn't catch your name. He asked her, certain that either of them had ever known one another. I didn't give it to you, there's nothing to catch, now ... Goodbye whoever you are, she said, immediately spinning towards the other side of the walkway. He couldn't help to feel like there was more to it, more to her as she hurried on her way. Get in the car, Tom. Hollered Dean, she isn't going anywhere, buddy, this one is yours. He said, as he lunged into the back seat, sitting beside Slinks. Someone should have taught her not to be so damn discourteous to a man in uniform, or out of uniform, damn it. Tommy, this is what my pops taught me a long time back, that slippery dame is known as the white-tailed shark. He said, Slinks and Chip began to snicker again as he blasted the motor. Boys, she's a sly one. But she isn't hiding today, fate is fate, boys, Dean shouted in excitement. This is bitchin', guys, it's really bitchin'. Us all hanging like old times, said Chip, holding his hands against the seat in front of him. Fellas, Tommy's going to get this one, I have a gut feeling on it. Slinks howled. Dean pressed hard on the gas until the car burned rubber. Slash or no slash, fellas, let's put some fire up under her. Chip shouted. Elvis Presley's I'm All Shook Up came on that very second as the radio blared into the summer air. Tommy, this time I want you to grab hold of her and make out, and do not, and I mean do not take no for an answer. Dean said, demanding him with a quirky smile on his face. Ha ha, you know I'm just messing with you, could you imagine if you did though? He asked him. I can, but I won't. She seems like upright girl, I'm not sure we should be pursuing her like this, he replied. Chip suddenly smacked him in the shoulder. Bud, what has gotten into you? You're not the same hard ass that left for Nam, you turning yellow on us or something? He asked him, glaring at him with curiosity building in his face. His eyebrows were dropped, and he appeared upset. Back off before I give you a knuckle sandwich, you don't want to rattle my cage. He said, sounding agitated. They want Tom, I'll give them Tom, he thought quietly to himself. Damn boy, I knew he was in there, I just knew it, Chip replied, patting him on the shoulder. It's about time, you see that leadership, Dean. Now that is a killer instinct I missed when you went off to kill them slant-eyed fucks. He clamored. This broad seems sophisticated, just talking to her I can tell she doesn't take no shit, he said, as they slowed around the corner of Lakeside Manor. Lakeside Manor was a development for the wealthier class. I bet they haven't seen hot rodders like us out here, haha, Dean said as he popped the clutch. Here she comes, fellas, she's stacked. Damn Tommy, why didn't you tell us, haha, said Slinks, staring at her from the seat. First impressions matter most, split now. Before she heads inside. Dean whispered at him. Listen ma'am, this is going to come out wrong. But I really want to know you, them guys are harmless, I'm not a part of that even if I'm riding with them grungy greasers. I'm actually not even certain if they know who I really am, he said, pointing towards the black Cadillac. She stared at him for a short moment, and then faced the others. What do you mean? Who you really are? Are you posing to be somebody you aren't? She questioned him. He couldn't help himself from noticing Slink was actually right about her being stacked and hep. He leveled his eyes onto hers, hoping she hadn't taken any notice. Look at this fool, he's pussyfooting with her. Something's wrong with him, Dean, I can't put my finger on it, said Chip. Cool it, Tom's been through the war and not every man comes back in one piece, he's still the Tom I know. Give it time, fellas, he said, as they observed him conversing with her. I'm going to be blunt here, I found myself out here and I don't even know where out here is. He said, smiling at her, hoping not to sound too crazy. These guys picked me up not far from here and somehow knew me, even though I can't recall knowing them. This whole day has been a wash, he said. Here I thought you were one of those backseat bingo types, haha. You're much worse off, Mr. You really are, she said, chuckling at him. I take it Tom is your real name? She asked him, peering at him awkwardly, but smiling. Yes. But I don't know much more than it. Could you tell me the year we're in? He asked, staring into her appealing eyes. 1961, where are you from, outer space? She then asked him, smiling wide-eyed. He smirked, not exactly. Are you sure that it's 1961? He questioned her, baffled and confused. Yes, United States just launched the first man into space, Alan Shepard. On the Freedom 7, she said, and then put her hand over her forehead. On January 20, the American politician John F. Kennedy became the 35th President of the United States. Now you can't tell me you didn't watch the election? She said, snickering at him. You're the one from outer space, you should know this already, haha, she said, but here I am wondering if I'm getting sick because I just met a man who says he's not from this time, she said, suddenly sounding focused on his every word. I'm from this time, ma'am, I'm just not sure how I came back to this year, he replied. I'm pretty sure I'm from 1970, well that's what year I remember most, he said, shaking his head. I must sound like a complete nut. I can't remember much about anything really. Just my name, but how I came back. I don't have the slightest clue, he said, peering at the others. The name's Beatrice Fulton, she said, but the name didn't mean anything to him as he stood inches from her. I'm not one to give out last names, haha, not this soon, she said with the corners of her mouth pried upwards. My close friends sometimes called me by my nickname Bessie, haha, she said. I don't use it much, although I'd rather it be that than Beatrice. She quickly added. He nodded. It's nice to meet you, Bessie, he said. Likewise, Tommy. She wondered if he even remembered his last name, and he did. Felper. Felper it is, he replied. Haha, now don't you go thinking just because you told me yours, I'm going to tell you mine, darling. I don't care how handsome you think you are, haha, she said, teasing him. Well, I better get back. I have a busy evening. I am a widowed mother, you know. Maybe I'll see you again, Tommy. If not, maybe in the near future we will run into each other again, she said, then she spun back towards the row of cottage homes. The fact was, he wasn't aware she was a husbandless mother and that she had children, he had just learned it about her. Strolling towards the Cadillac, he began to wonder why she had mentioned it. So? Asked Dean, staring at him as he climbed back in with the others waiting impatiently. So. What? He replied, peering at him face to face as he sunk back against the red leather. Don't play stupid, Tommy. Did you lure her in or not, haha? He asked, turning towards Chip and then Slinks. The others listening began to mimic the two. Shut up, you candiuses. Dean hollered at the others. I'm trying to talk here. Not exactly, Tommy responded, realizing his instant disappointment. Why the hell not? He said, dropping his shades over his eyes. He turned the key, causing the large-cylindered engine to roar. She's a mother, she has children. That's why, he countered him. No damn way does that skirt have kids, there's no way, she was putting you on, fella. He snapped back. Tommy shrugged his shoulders. Then I guess she fooled me. Chapter 8. A time ago. Hey guys. It's time for a beer run. Shouted Slinks, who immediately clapped as if he had said something worth paying attention to. We're not going on a beer run just yet, Slinky, we have to get Tommy Boy back on target. I think it's time for him to meet our newest member of the group, he said, turning towards the back. He suddenly winked at him. Dean. I have things I have to get done. Just drop me off here, he responded, but he squeezed the pedal and held it down. Not until you and Mackie meet each other. If you have a problem with it, just tell me now. He said, pinching a cigarette from his ear. He glared at him as he struck a match against the wheel and lit it. Whatever, just drive. The black caddy revved and screamed as they bolted towards town. "3 o'clock fellas, is that old Bennett's son?" Chip hollered, pointing out a matte black Chevy Impala. "Beats me," replied Dean, as he fixed his attention on it. "Whoever's car it is, it's all show and no go," he screeched, dropping the pedal again until the wheels spun. "It sure is cheery," shrieked Slinks, who was taking in the evening air. He let out a noisy breath as they merged into the lane beside it. "Cruising the strip?" hollered Dean, hanging his neck out. "Fuck off, greaser," yowled the teenage man driving the jacked-up Chevrolet Impala, immediately dropping the hammer. Smoke barreled from its dual exhaust as it pulled ahead and caught a red light not far from them. "That stupid buzzard, he asked for it fellas," shouted Dean, barely colliding with the man's car, missing it within inches as he pulled beside him. "You wanted beef, now you're going to get it, chicken shit," he yelped, glaring at the steady light. "It's on now, boy. I hope those fancy wheels you got there are amped up," he shouted, but the man continued facing the windshield awaiting the light to change. "All that talk and no play fellas, take a look at this joker, you see this? Now, Tommy boy, you keep forgetting who you are and you will turn out like that tape shit motherfucker." Dean howled, "On the count of 3 mamas boy," he shouted towards the man sitting in the souped-up Impala. Tommy observed him before the light switched. The teenage man had a clean-shaven short blonde hair. He wore a leather motorcycle jacket with silver zippers and a white t-shirt underneath. With a fatigued expression on his face, the radio in front of him began to wail out Carl Perkins' Matchbox. "The cat got good taste for music, but I betcha he bails down the stretch," shouted Chip, sitting across in the passenger side. "Asshole communists don't belong in the United States of America. I fought for this country, you fish-fried yellow belly, you're going down tonight, douchebag," he shouted again, tapping his cigarette against the door causing its ashes to drop. "After the slow life gets his, I really want to get blitzed, what do you say? We going for a beer run or what?" Slinks asked him, but the light shot green and so did the Cadillac. It left tire tracks as both hovered down the busy intersection. No more than a tick later, Tommy smacked his fists against the driver's seat. "Bail buddy, bail. The fuzz, let him go or we're getting busted." Dean lifted his eyes from the steering wheel and poked them into the rear view. "Good looking out, Tommy boy, I didn't even catch that pig sitting back there," he said, still staring at the parked police car. "Bennett's boy has always been a prick, it'll chill out for now, peacekeeper," he replied, slowing the car until it paced the others streaming alongside. The matte black Impala was now nowhere in sight. "Chicken shit's car had some serious muscle. I'll admit that fellas," he then added, peering ahead. "Kibosh, when I say kibosh fellas. Shut your mouth, or I'll shut your trap for ya." Dean uttered, "That Impala couldn't lay a patch if he dropped 2 engines," and he then said, "If that fuzz wasn't back there I would light them up. I'll tell you what, soldier, I'll take you to meet Mackie another time. I'm in desperate need of a broom." Slinks. You have the bread?" he asked him. Slinks leaned towards him. "Yes sir, I have 99 cents, should be enough to get us a 6-pack of Old Dutch. I'll spot us $2 more and get us each a double-decker hamburger with fries, salad and ice cream for dessert," replied Dean, studying another convertible slowly approaching his. He peeped at the pink 1950s Cadillac Eldorado with white wall tires. "Are we having fun yet?" Chip shouted, towards 4 young women coupled together side by side, all of them babes. The driver had on a pair of pink cat-eye sunglasses. Tommy peered at her first, noticing her soft red lipstick. The name Jane Mansfield suddenly surfaced in his thoughts. "Hey there doll, has anyone ever told you, you could be mistaken for Jane Mansfield? You know, the movie star?" he blurted out from the backseat. She turned at him and lowered her lenses to get a look at him. She winked and began to giggle along with her friends. "How old are you?" she asked him, realizing he was much older than herself. "He's a hunk," murmured one of her friends sitting behind. He stared at her. "Well, that's a question only my friends can answer for me," They know me better than I know myself, he responded, smiling at her. Dean peered in the rearview mirror again, wondering if he had a loose screw somewhere. Babe, don't listen to this fool, he's been giving us a crock of bullshit all day. Tell her your age, he said, dictating the two. All right, you asked for it. I'm 38, he uttered, noticing her face turning a bright blush-colored red. You're 38? She replied, sounding curious. That doesn't sound right. Your boyish looks tell me otherwise, she said, turning towards another girl at her side. Girls, do you hear this? What kind of man would claim he's that much older than what he really is, ha ha? She said, peering at the girl closest to her before spinning back towards the caddy. Are you pulling my leg? I'd say you were in your 20s at the most, she then said, noticing Dean, Slinks and Chip gawking at her and the others with her. What did I tell you? He's been feeding us this crock all morning, Dean said, sounding frustrated. He's 28, I don't understand the damn guy anymore. He comes back from Nam and hasn't been the same since, he said, taking a drag from the cigarette in his left hand. We're just cruising. I was planning on finding my good old boy a main squeeze. He's been a square so far, ha ha, but maybe we can change that, although, maybe seems to be the task at hand, ha ha, he then said. Chip immediately leaned towards Dean and the pink caddy, complaining to the young woman. Tell me about it, he's really pushing my buttons with all of his, I don't know who I am and how I got here nonsense. Tom was the genuine artifact before he left for Vietnam, now. Shit, he's uptight and not the same, he said, peering at him through the side mirror. They continued to follow side by side with the girls, rolling along the busiest drag circuit in town. Tom sat quietly tuning the others out. Something inside began to persuade him that something big was about to happen. What it was or when it was he didn't have the slightest notion. You guys are a kick, if you're interested meet us at the lookout point on Friday, bring your oddball friend, haha, she said, sounding amused. I'll do that, dollface. If you and your girlfriends want to join us tonight we will be at Joe's Roadhouse, he said, inviting them out. A beauteous long-haired blonde sitting beside her, swiftly peered over at him. I hear Joe's apple pie is the best around and at 35 cents a slice you can't go wrong. She replied for her. She was wearing a sleeveless dress, it was turquoise with a leopard-printed collar. Maybe we will see you boys over there. I'm Elizabeth and to my right, that's Carrie and in the back, behind me, is Sandy and Jane, she said, observing Tommy in the back seat behind Dean. That's a mean machine you got there, added Sandy sitting across from them in the back. Well, maybe sometime you can take a ride in this jet, Dean said, smirking, staring at her. She observed him a moment and gave him the peace sign. That sounds gnarly, she humbly replied. Slinks leaned towards Tommy, whispering in his ear so the girls wouldn't hear. Maybe this time you will catch a feel, ha ha. He shook his head, shrugging his shoulders, not saying anything in return. He suddenly waved, peering across at Elizabeth sitting behind the steering wheel. See you gals out there. Dean smiled at them as he mashed the accelerator to the floor mat, sending the pistons into a powerful frenzy. Right on, she said, as they pulled ahead of them, heading towards the west end of Marietta. It's been real, girls, he hollered, flicking the cigarette he was holding out into the road. Come on fellas, Soldier Boy has an appointment to get to, cried Dean from the driver's seat. Punch it, cried Chip at his side. I think I'm about to have the munchies fellas, ha ha. The others sat quietly, approaching a billboard hanging overhead that read Get a Bite at Joe's. The advertisement was printed in mint green lettering and portrayed an American family sitting together enjoying a savory shrimp dinner. Chapter 9 left out. Tommy climbed out from the caddy, peering out into the unforeseen. Soldier, next time I see you ... I want to see the old Tom, not the new Tom, ha ha, shouted Dean from the driver's side. You were a cool cat until you came back from Nam, said Chip at his side. Are you sure you're alright, buddy? Maybe, just maybe you ought to skip that dental shit and ride out to Joe's Roadhouse with us, he spoke again as the others watched him along the sidewalk. I'm good boys, It's been a doozy seeing you guys again. I'll figure it all out. Maybe I just need a little soul searching," he replied, spinning towards the nearest house behind him. He stared at it a moment and then back at the guys. In the back of his mind he wasn't sure if it were just another attempt at keeping the fellas at bay. It probably was, but they weren't that understanding. "Well guys, I'm going to get inside and grab a few things. Catch you again soon," he said, glaring pessimistic at the three. In reality he didn't want to take another chance of stirring up something he couldn't get himself out of. He had no idea where he was, which house number was his, or what to expect when he went inside. "Hey Moon Man, that one is yours, haha," cried Slinks. "Just in case you forgot your entire brain in Vietnam, buddy," he said, pointing it out. He spun around to examine it. It was a 1940s stone suburban house with yellow shutters. He peered towards it, noticing the garage to its right was open. "Thanks Slinks, I might have needed that," he said, chuckling. "Catch you later," cried Chip. "You too," he replied back, now standing in the front yard. "Pull yourself together," Dean then uttered. "We missed you, kid," he said, dropping the clutch. The others nodded towards him as they sped away into the evening. He approached the house wondering to himself the meaning behind everything. "Why am I here? You throw me into the past. But why? What is the significance of 1960? Dumbfounded, he asked himself again, as he had since meeting the boys. He touched the door, suddenly realizing not far behind him he could hear the neighbors outside sitting on the steps. They were engaging with one another. He held the knob, listening to their conversation. Facing the door he began to eavesdrop, wondering if they knew him the way the fellas had. Their voices were faint as he twisted the knob as if it were locked and he had forgotten the key. "Don't draw their attention, just play it as it looks," he thought, harking on them. "Hey, Tom, you need a hand getting inside?" queried a man's voice from behind. The couple gossiping had noticed him and were concentrated on him fighting with the door. "No, it's just one of them tricky locks. I'll have to change it out sometime. This rim lock has been this way for some time. No problem, I'll get in," he cried, noticing the man nearing him. "You don't have to be a prude, haha, not for my help, I'm not taking no for an answer. I'm on my way over," the man said, as he joggled with the door, desperate to get it opened. "Damn it, look what you done now. Got the whole fucking neighborhood watching. Get the hell inside before he comes up on the deck," he thought frantically. "I seen you were struggling over there, must have forgotten them darn keys, huh?" the man hollered, approaching him. He was nicely dressed and appeared to be a businessman of some sorts. The man in his probable 30s wore black Edwardian knickers, a white button-down Victorian dress shirt with a pair of matching classic suspenders. His hair reminded him of Clark Gable's from the 30s flick Gone with the Wind. "I'm all right, see, I got it open," he cried, pulling it open in an effort to elude the man. And as the man spoke, he fell through the dark doorway. Laying against the carpet, he used his foot to kick the door shut behind him. The overly helpful man outside was gone, finally. Sheesh, talk about determination, he thought to himself. "I wonder how many neighbors ran away after meeting him," he murmured, lifting his head up to get a look around. "Are you serious? This is where I live, huh?" he pondered, up on his feet now. "Not much to look at, but home is home is home," he muttered aloud. Standing at the foot of the living room, everything surrounding him gave him a feeling of nostalgia. "I've been here before," he thought. He approached the sofa centered in the room and ran his fingers across it. A tedious familiarity came over him. A strong sensation, an anomaly, a precognition of a past memory instantly hit him. "This is strange," he thought quietly, tracing the arm. "I don't remember this. But at the same time I do remember." He wondered, briskly leaving it. He spun back at the doorway. He made his way towards the nearest window and stood glaring out into the evening. Chapter 10 Draft Day. Immediately, the sunlight thrashed against him, causing him to shield his face. Wakey, wakey ha, are you okay there, machine gunner? Asked a familiar voice at his side. Oh. Depends on who is asking. He replied, finally releasing his fingers. Dean? What's going on? How did I get here? He cried. Dean peered at him squinting. Bud, are you alright? You asked for a ride, you know? To the barracks, you fall asleep or something? You're shipping out to Nam Man. He said, steadying the steering wheel. No, I don't remember anything about anything. What the hell is going on here? Are you saying I've been drafted? He then asked. He stopped holding the wheel and used his knees to balance it, immediately throwing both of his hands up in the air. All of this, Tommy, can be ours. Since we were boys you've been dreaming of a better place for our families to grow up in. You forgot about that? Nobody forgets a dream like that, bud. He shouted. Tom glared at him a moment and then shook his head in disbelief. This cannot be happening. Note again. This isn't real, it's an illusion. That's what he thought, peering at the ocean blue skyline. Now, Gunner, you're the top dog. So when you get over there to Vietnam I want to hear that you killed as many of them suckers as you could have slaughtered. Oh, and don't you let me down. I better get a ton of letters spilling out all the juicy details, ha. He hollered, placing his hands back down. Where are the boys? Chip and Slinks? Let me guess. You dropped them off for a beer run, ha. He scoffed, realizing he didn't appear as enthusiastic. Now that wasn't funny in the least bit, that was downright rude. What's gotten into you, Tom? He responded. He gawked at him as he drove. They were just here, Slinky and Chip, complaining about me and ragging on me, he said. We were sitting right here. Slinks asked you to take us on a beer run. Now you're saying they weren't or aren't, or never had been. I'm so fucking lost. What year is it? You know they didn't make it back. Those fucking commies and their booby-trapped motorcycles took them out. He hollered. Not this time, not with you, killer. You have to get them sons of bitches back for Slinky and Chip. He shouted again, pounding a closed fist against the steering wheel. He held it there as if it were one of them underneath his quivering fingers. Fucking die already, die maggots, die now. He then turned at him in the passenger side with a silly smirk across his face. They were blown up into tiny pieces, Tom. They had to shovel them up and put their remains in those tiny plastic zip bags, man. Do you know what else gets shoveled up in that way? Dog shit, man, fucking dog shit. Their families had to see this. Honor my ass, them rats are going to pay. He cried, becoming hysterical. I'll pay 'em all back, just calm down, he responded, hoping for them not to crash. How much further to the barracks? He asked him, peering at him. 15 miles or less. I'm good now, Tommy boy, I'm good, no worries. I just miss my brother, my dear baby brother, Slinky. I'll be with you in time, he said, closing his eyes before opening them. Rest easy, brother, he murmured. Tears of frustration covered the bottom of his eyelids. It took Tommy by surprise, hearing it all. Your brother was a good man, a damn valiant man and a damn fine brother. I won't let him die in vain, he said, reassuring him. How could I have not known this? Slinks and Dean? Brothers? He wondered, not comprehending any of it. Shit. Dean cried, suddenly struggling in the seat. Fuck, it's burning me. He wailed. What's burning you? Cried Tom, peering over at him, wondering if he was missing something. My cigarette, man, I dropped it. Ouch, son of a. He cried, hopping around in the driver's seat. He fought to hold on to the wheel. Do you see it? I can't find it. I'm burning, man. Fuck, he shrieked, holding his buttocks up from the bench seat.